LinkedIn believes B2B marketing can be to brilliant, be to bold, and be to breakthrough. How? With a platform purpose-built to make B2B mean more for your business. A platform with tools to help you build better relationships with your key customers, to boost your buyer journey while building your brand. A platform with the trusted data and lead generation you need to beat KPIs, drive ROI, and stand out amongst the competition. And with the targeting tools on LinkedIn, you can reach your precise audience right down to their job title, company name, location, and more to make sure your ads are always being seen by those who matter. So get ready to boldly go where no marketers have gone before, because LinkedIn is where B2B is everything it can be. Rethink your B2B marketing LinkedIn ads and get a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply.
Greetings, you marketing podcast junkies. This is Tim Hines, the host of the Marketing Starter podcast on MPN. On the show, I sit down with marketing thought leaders and pioneers from around the world and unpack how they use an entrepreneurial spirit to excel in all that they do. So tune in on your favorite podcasting platform every other week to find new ways of kickstarting your marketing career.
I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. My guest this week is Dr. Richard Winters.
Culture is values plus behavior. And so values, like we're familiar with that, you can read like organizational values, but we may just think those. If we're not embodying them, then those values aren't represented in culture. So as leaders, we need to be actually embodying those values and displaying those in our one-to-one interactions with colleagues.
Dr. Richard Winters is an emergency physician at the Mayo Clinic. As Director of Leadership Development for the Mayo Clinic Care Network, Dr. Winters delivers programs that train leaders at all levels of healthcare organizations worldwide. As an executive coach, Dr. Winters provides coaching for Mayo Clinic leaders. Winters graduated from the Mayo Clinic Alix School of Medicine in 1994 and returned to Mayo Clinic in 2015. Previously, Winters served as a managing partner of a Democratic physician group, department chair of an emergency department, president of an 800-physician medical staff, and CEO-founder of a startup managed care organization that struggled to survive amidst the complex relationships among hospital, physician, patient, competitors, and insurance providers. Dr. Winters, welcome to On Brand.
Thank you for having me. I enjoy our opportunity to talk.
Yeah, well, in thinking about these past couple of years and being in emergency medicine and coaching leadership internally, all my first thought in thinking about this is a poorly phrased question of, So
I think you summed it up right there. That's pretty well stated.
So, when someone makes that kind of noise when they learn about what you do, what's your kind of run through of what these past few years did in your profession?
Yeah, healthcare is always one of these, it's a place of volatility and uncertainty and complexity and ambiguity. And it's a place where we're always having to change and kind of rethink our current situation and move forward. COVID was a very kind of different sort of pressing thing. So usually we're able to do things in terms of months or years. COVID came along and we're hearing about this thing that's going on in China. That's never going to come over here. And then all of a sudden our colleagues are getting sick. Our families are getting sick. It's a serious thing. And you don't have time to have committees. You can't put out an annual plan for this. This is something where individuals just need to come together and make some really difficult decisions. And so my experience was that throughout healthcare, that's what was going on. You had these individuals stepping up and leading organizations during times where resources were scarce. The disease was, horrifying. But I feel like we came together pretty well.
So I feel like one thing that was shared frequently during all of that was the Mister Rogers look for the helpers in a role where it kind of sounds like you are charged with helping the helpers. What did that look like?
So charged with helping the helpers. I mean, I think so. So it's as on the one hand, as I say, we came together very well. There was a lot of urgencies there. I think it's during those times it's quite difficult because at each level there are needs, and it's hard for each level to necessarily get all the resources and the needs that they have, and that creates some difficult situations. So leading in those moments is trying to identify, the helpers. What is it that they're needing, and how can we help get them a voice? And resources may be limited, but what can we do as our next best step?
So, in talking about leadership in the medical community, what does that overlay look like when you have the level of patient care and then medical leadership, kind of beyond that, the layers that support that?
And I don't think it's much different than other organizations. And so we have the formal leadership chart, and CEO, VP, directors on down. You'll have department chairs, and you'll have practice and education chairs and things like that, depending on your situation. And so individuals who hold these formal titles. But then there are also the informal leaders, and those are plenty and throughout. And so it's within healthcare, just like in any other organization, it's bringing both the formal and the informal leaders together to be able to move from kind of like a formal the leader as expert perspective of what's going on, and being able to look at things from a more kind of collective approach. And I think within healthcare, again, not dissimilar to other places. Certainly, you have, as an emergency physician, I can go and walk into a room and see a patient, talk to them for a few minutes, doing a brief exam, and really know the orders that I need to write and the things that need to get done. And that's no different than a marketer or someone who's an engineer tackling a problem. Quite different, though, when we become leaders and we step into these leadership roles where we can't just enter a conversation with 10 of our colleagues and tell them what should be happening as we're trying to respond. It's now it requires this agility to be able to put our expertise down and start to facilitate. And our best leaders are able to do that. And whether that's a surgeon or whether that's an engineer or a salesperson, they're able to do that. They're able to step up and facilitate.
I really like what you said about, there's the formal org chart leaders and then there's informal leaders. Because I think sometimes it's easy to have this kind of baggage on the leadership label, which is very big now. But I think there's many that might feel, well, I'm not an org chart leader, so leadership isn't that's not for me. But there's many, like you said, that are in informal roles of leadership. So how do you find those informal leaders and get them connected with the resources that they need?
Yeah, I mean, you can just simply, and so there. You can ask people, so during times of difficulty, who would be the most likely person that you go to talk to? And you could get a list of names, and you can kind of feel this as you're talking to your network. During times of difficulty, who's the individual who'd be most likely to block change? And sometimes that individual is the one who's running the show, so the person with a formal leadership title. So you're looking for those individuals who are able to work together and get along together and collaborate. And then I think as you're choosing leaders, you're looking for people with those sorts of skills, those sorts of approaches to how they're making sense of situations. And so you identify those individuals who can not just think in terms of this and that or dichotomies, ones and zeros, but those individuals who are able to see multiple different perspectives and can facilitate decisions based on that, which is different. I think a lot of us think of leaders as being the ones with power. The reason they got there is because they had the power, they had the ideas of what should be done, which in some circumstances and certainly in static environments when things aren't changing, that can go very well. But in dynamic environments, you need those individuals who can really highlight the perspectives of others and help us see around the blind spots that we have.
I'm paraphrasing, but I feel like there is a Brené Brown definition in Dare to Lead about a leader is anyone who is, like you just said, responsible for empowering others to do their best work. So, and you mentioned change in there, and this has obvious parallels with what we were just talking about with COVID. But what are some of the learned secrets of leadership through change?
I think as each of us are going about our day, as we go into meetings, we hear about these really difficult problems, and just to realize that in those moments we have the answers. Like it's so easy. I could throw anything at you, and it's likely that you would come up with an answer in a moment, and that's based on your experience and your expertise. But it's also quite reflexive, and probably has some blind spots behind that. And so I think our best leaders they start to realize this. And as we're looking at change, our first inclination for what to do and how we can correct this, there's some truth in there, but there are also some blind spots. And so to be able to deal with change, it's really how do we identify what we think, and then quickly how do we expand to what others think? What are the disagreements? What are the fears and the worries? What are the other perspectives that people have? And then gathering those together, developing a shared vision, and then only then do we start to think about the options for what we might do moving forward and how we're going to move forward. This tends to be different than the leader who jumps into the room and just says, okay, this is the way forward. As you do that, it seems like it saves some time. But actually what you're doing is you're moving forward without all the different perspectives and through your blind spots. And change is kind of difficult in those situations.
On Brand, we'll be right back after this. LinkedIn believes B2B marketing can be to brilliant, be to bold, and be to breakthrough. How? With a platform purpose-built to make B2B mean more for your business. A platform with tools to help you build better relationships with your key customers, to boost your buyer journey while building your brand. A platform with the trusted data and lead generation you need to beat KPIs, drive ROI, and stand out amongst the competition. And with the targeting tools on LinkedIn, you can reach your precise audience right down to their job title, company name, location, and more, to make sure your ads are always being seen by those who matter. So get ready to boldly go where no marketers have gone before, because LinkedIn is where B2B is everything it can be. Rethink your B2B marketing LinkedIn ads and get a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Carrie Barrett hosts a great podcast called The VIQ Project. Carrie, tell us what these fine folks will get out of listening.
Okay, you know how you go to shoot a 2-minute video, except it takes 2 hours. You hate yourself on camera. You don't know what to do with it, and so it doesn't perform. You'll get all the tips and tricks you need to fix all of that on this podcast.
Wow, we're going to be lining up for this. Where can people subscribe?
You can find it on my website, which is carriebarrett.com. You can also find it if you search the VIQ Project Podcast on YouTube. Of course, you can find the show at marketingpodcasts.net, or you can subscribe and search for the VIQ Project Podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
Now, back to the show. So you were talking about, moving forward with that vision, and in talking about that, what are some key lessons in? I mean, my domain that I often bring to the table is that of communication, and in talking about leadership communication. How is that different than your basic interpersonal communication?
I don't know that it's that much different. And so I think that, one of the things is as leaders, we're establishing the culture of the organization. And so for me, what is culture? Culture is values plus behavior. And so values, like we're familiar with that. You can read like organizational values. These are all very important. We see them on the screensavers at work. We see them on the placards, and you kind of read them in the documents, and we can align with those. But we may just think those. If we're not embodying them, then those values aren't represented in culture. So as leaders, we need to be actually embodying those values and displaying those in our one-to-one interactions with colleagues. And as we're making decisions, we need to be embodying those. And we've seen, I think about Theranos, recently been in the news. What are their values? Integrity, excellence, and a team approach. Do we think they've been embodying those values? I think as we're reading things, it sounds like not. And so this is an example of an organization and leaders perhaps that were not actually embodying those values. And so I think it's walking the talk in terms, so you don't have a sour culture to create a good culture. So then, as you're making a decision and you're visioning for the future, as you're solving these problems, are you actually embedding the organizational values in the solution? Are we going to move forward with change in a way that that displays teamwork, that displays integrity and excellence? And if so, what might that look like? And so it's leaders coming together one-on-one, but also with groups and just really embracing and embodying those values to move forward.
So you talk about embodying the excellence and values, and I feel like in jumping through this and this conversation and getting right into the trenches of the past couple of years, we've zoomed right past the fact that you are at arguably the leading organization, and certainly when I speak about brands in the healthcare space, um, you're alone in that excellence consistently in terms of what you do. So, how does that happen at the Mayo Clinic, or what are the directional goals that drive you towards that excellence and help you to be, name a healthcare brand? And this is a question I ask, and Mayo Clinic is always right out front there.
Yeah, I mean, so I returned to Mayo in 2015, and for 20 years, so I went to medical school here from 90 to 94, and then was in California for 20-something years, returned here in 2015. And so why did I return here? And it was really based on the values of the organization. And again, not just on the placards, just not the screensavers, but it's displayed in, first of all, how the organization formed and the traditions that came from there, the individuals that founded the organization, Will and Charlie, and the sisters that formed it, and the stories that they told. And then along the way, just these successive stories about meeting the needs of patients. And on a daily basis here, we're hearing the stories about how we're meeting the needs of patients and how that is being done, reflected by our values and by the mission of the organization. And so it's for me a very special thing to be a part of an organization where there is that walk the talk. And as decisions are made for strategy moving forward, you're always balancing this tradition and what's happened in the past with innovation and what we might be doing together in the future. I mean, we know that best practice of today is actually the past practice of yesterday. But you have those different perspectives in the room. And when you're grounded with the values of the organization and the stories that have been told, the innovation and the direction of that innovation becomes clearer than when you're ungrounded and the culture isn't working together.
I like that you've now a couple of times said not just the placards and the screensavers. And I feel like the easy box to check whenever anyone's thinking out there, oh, shoot, culture, excellence, get some placards and screens. It's like that's right where we go to. So it's worth
Right.
It's worth the repeated mentions that it's not just that. Sure, great to have them, but that is not that is not the box that gets checked for doing this work, because, like you said, it goes back to the hard work of all the way from the founders to everyone that's followed in their footsteps. So are there touch points along the way internally that keep folks connected with that brand of excellence at Mayo?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a day-to-day basis, we're hearing the stories of how we're serving the needs of patients. So I think that's one. I think a big thing is how are leaders being chosen? And so it's oftentimes within organizations that leaders are chosen kind of from within the ranks. And so, for example, within emergency medicine, you may have a department of emergency medicine that chooses their leader based on an individual who best can represent the emergency physicians, the individual who can speak really well and kind of get the emergency physicians what the emergency physicians need. That is helpful, but it's also very kind of focused on the power and the needs of just the individual department. And so as you start to choose leaders in an organization based on those who can best represent their department, they may not be the same leaders as those who can best represent the organization. And so a difference as I returned to Mayo was we have a personnel committee, which is made up of physicians from multiple different specialties. And the whole purpose of the personnel committee is to identify and choose the future leaders. And so they'll go to departments and say, hey, who do you think would be a good leader? Who do you think has represented and displayed the values of the organization, who's working well with colleagues and has the right stuff? But in the end, it's going to be the personnel committee that's going to be making that choice. And they're going to be making it as they're stepping back, as they're looking at the organization as a whole, and looking for those individuals who can collaborate with nurses and administrators and really speak from the perspective of a patient, not just being taken care of from within the individual's own specialty. And so I think the organizations that choose their leaders in a way that represents the mission, the values of their organizations, I think these are competitive organizations when compared to those who do not.
Well, that's a really important, a lot to make the obvious joke. It's a lot harder than the placards, though. Getting your people and talent management right, and even down to the assessment of what the right needs are in the organization, in this area of the organization at that time as well is again, it's not a screensaver we can make sure is on everyone's machine.
Yeah, I mean, the screensavers, and I'm an emergency physician, right? I can walk into a room and I hear stories and I can kind of tell pretty fast what's what has substance and what may be more fabricated. And the placards and the screensavers can pretty quickly start to sound like marketees, kind of fake and shallow. Unless actually the organization is embodying them and the leaders are embodying them, and we're running the organization reflected in them.
Yeah, that's because I think what that gets to in what you're talking about, if I'm hearing correctly, is authenticity. Now, I work in marketing, and I heard something earlier in my week referred to as it was a nice presentation. It was a marketing presentation, and I knew, and I tried not to take it too personally, it was not meant as as
Right.
a compliment, and I think it's because we're looking for a level of authenticity today to really foster that connection and make sure everyone's moving in that same direction. Is that what you would say?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, if you have a leader who is authentically trying to serve the needs of themselves or of their silo, I think that comes off to anyone else on the committee as being someone who is serving the needs of themselves or of their silo. And so you're looking really to develop leaders who are serving the needs of, in our case, the patient. And so serving the needs of the organization. And that's not marketing. That is just what we do.
And from that, I think you could make the marketing case that from that excellence, that's why you get that brand that is the Mayo Clinic, that is just known as excellence in the field, as not standalone, not having any peers at that same level because of that deep connection to the work and the delivery of that work.
Yeah, I mean, each of us has an opportunity we have aspirations, and I think we can identify, again, going back with the values, but we need to be converting those into action. And it's not easy. COVID has been a very difficult time. And for organizations just like Mayo Clinic, it's been very difficult. How do you adapt quite quickly in these environments? But the more we can fall back on these aspirations, these values, and convert them into action and results, you're moving from a grounded space.
So we've talked a bit about COVID. We've talked about change management. I feel like I have to ask you as something of an expert, because I stumble with the temporal conversation each week in these interviews of describing, and where we're at now is is I don't think anyone's comfortable saying post-pandemic, but maybe we are. So, one, is there what's the non-clumsy way of talking about where we are now, and what kind of lessons can we take out of this to return to some idea of normal again?
Gosh. I mean, where are we right now? And I think we are still. So I think about, are we in a space where we know everything about what's going on with COVID? We know about how to stop COVID. We know how to, the effects of COVID. Do we know, are there all knowns? And I think we're not. And so we're still in this place of unknowns. I think we're still in this place of discovery where we're learning things. And as we're learning things, we're adapting to those learnings, and then we're trying to find the best way forward. That is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. Wouldn't it be wonderful if everything was known and then we can just move on? It's just not the case, unfortunately. And so what this requires are not each of us as individuals shouting, or speaking what we believe are the knowns and the ways we think things should be. It requires us to actually come together and understand all the different perspectives we have, all the sciences as it's evolving, all the different bits of information, the agreements and disagreements, and coming from that place to move forward. I think in time, many unknowns become known, and then we can ask the experts, and we can start to have some more clarity on where to go. But prematurely. Dealing with complex environments as an expert, it does not lead you to make good decisions.
And I feel like in all of that, all I can think of is what's the Don Rumsfeld quote on the known unknowns, and
Right.
It's a lot to juggle. Well, as we talk about what's known and not, it is time for me to ask you for a brand that has made you smile recently. And I think if you're bringing a smile to the face of someone in the healthcare profession at this very challenging time, you're doing great work. So is there someone, Dr. Winters, that's done that for you?
Yeah. So I'm a tea drinker. So I drink a lot of Chinese green teas, and there's an organization in San Francisco called Song, SONG Tea. And the person who operates it is Peter Song, and he goes out and sources teas from small farms in Taiwan and China, and I love reading about them, and I love drinking them. It makes me feel connected with other parts of the world, and it tastes great. And so it's one of these simple things that I enjoy that makes my day better.
Well, I love this question for so many reasons, but I love hearing the answers and learning about all of these new brands doing interesting work, and your point too about it connecting you to the world. I'm on a quest to make tea work. I want to, cut my coffee down as I stare into the cup in front of me right now.
Yeah, right.
But I'm working to find stuff that is not the Ted Lasso definition of hot brown water.
Right. Yeah, it's a whole production. I mean, it is not just you get the right leaves. There's different kinds of tea, but also getting the water. And so for this tea, I brewed it at 176 degrees, which means that you're getting a pot that can tell you what the temperature is. And there's a certain steep time. And there's a nice ritual to it that I really appreciate. I think it's healthy.
Yeah, I feel like, see, that's the thing. That's why I really struggle with this, because I feel like I could be a tea person because I'm a bit of a foodie. I like temperatures and time and the different aspects there, and and the stories, like you said. So I got to find a way in, and maybe Song T can help me out as well. Dr. Winters, where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So I have a very creatively named website, richardwinters.com, after my name. And so you can just go to richardwinters.com. Otherwise, I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Twitter. And Twitter, it's Dr. R. Winters, and you'll see me there.
Awesome. Well, we will link up to all of that at our show notes that folks can find at the also creatively named onbrandpodcast.com. Dr. Richard Winters, thank you for being on brand with us.
Thank you very much.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.